Welcome to the Coaching Family Soccer Coaching Podcast, a podcast for soccer coaches from grassroots to the pro game. Soccer coaches who love the game, love coaching, and want to get better. Join our community on Twitter at Coaching Family.
So, welcome back to another episode of the the Coaching Family Soccer Coaching Podcast for coaches all around the world. Joined as usual by very good friend Glenn Hicks. Glenn, how you doing?
Good, thanks, mate.
Good to have you on, mate. Fantastic. And today we're talking about 1v1, the 1v1 duel, or outplaying as some call it. Going to have a little discussion around that and about, session design and outcomes and just general things coaches, just things we think about when we're thinking about delivering that in our session. But just what's your initial thoughts? We're talking about 1v1. What's your initial thoughts about 1v1?
Yeah, it's a good question in terms of, I think a lot of general opinions, or especially in grassroots football, just in my experience, is when you say 1v1, the first thing that springs to mind is Lionel Messi dribbling against the fullback, which is a great duel. So when you look down the years, I remember for about 5 years, I think Ashley Cole and Cristiano Ronaldo had the best ding-dong 1v1 battles. But I think I look at it a little bit broader, and I've probably learned to do that last 10 years, to be honest. And I look at the 1v1 duel in lots of ways and then I'll design my practice from there, to be honest. So from Sergio Busquets receiving the ball like a master, 1v1, and outplaying his opponent with great body shape, good receiving skills, fantastic passing, to obviously your usual 1v1 dribbling. And it goes on, you can go all around the pitch with that. So I look at it as a 1v1 duel, like you said, and I try and design a practice where you get as many little 1v1 outcomes as possible, really. That would be my starting point.
I think it's interesting, isn't it? Because you look classically at 1v1, and the majority of 1v1s, you look at coaches doing sessions are going to be, the conventional players dribbling at a player from 5 or 10 yards sort of thing. And I think, as same as I've sort of, over 20 years, doing 1v1, we've learned that, obviously the 1v1 in the game is a lot more variation, like you talked about. Do you know what I mean? Most 1v1s are maybe actually with players in behind or on the side, or just those much more tighter spaces anyway. And also 1v1 without the ball as well, in terms of running behind or movements to get on the ball and create the ball. But I'm just a big thing, I was thinking recently actually about just general balance. Do you know what I mean? And we talk a lot about balance in teams and, trying to unbalance the defenses and teams. And really, I focus a lot about trying to unbalance individuals and unbalance defenders. So if you unbalance the defender, then you unbalance the team. Do you know what I mean? So I think it's quite an interesting sort of, way of looking at it, isn't it? And a really key thing. I mean, and a lot of people talk about, one of my pet peeves, grievances, 1v1's not 100 step overs and all this and all that and this and that, on the Twitter sphere. But reality is actually, 1v1, like you said, looks different all over the pitch. In the modern game, from your keeper to your fullback to your strength forward, everybody needs 1v1 qualities. Everybody needs to be able to get on the ball and stay on the ball under pressure. That's the modern game. And then I suppose it's then about, how we develop our sessions to develop those qualities, and then also then to prepare our players for the modern game.
Absolutely, and that's the important thing. So we're preparing for the modern game. So if our objective is, obviously, if you're in an elite environment, your objective is to create the best footballers possible and get the best out of them. We've almost got to have a bit of foresight and think, well, that's okay. But if we've got a 10-year-old now, we've got to try and look and see what the game's going to look like in 8 to 10 years' time. But what I would say as well, when you look back in history, and I like to do that a lot, the game don't change much in terms of when you watch Bobby Moore or Franz Beckenbauer read the game, and they dominate 1v1 with their exceptional anticipation of the game, great timing on their interceptions. I think it looks very similar to a Rio Ferdinand or a Virgil van Dijk today. And I think you go back, look at the dribblers. If you look at Lionel Messi today, I think you'd see a lot of, in terms of the technical components, you'd see a lot of similarities with a Garrincha or a George Best or a Johan Cruyff. So I think as much as we want to prepare them for the modern game, we also want to stick to some core values that are the best players yesterday would probably be the best players today. So if you picked up Pele and put him in today's football, he'd still be a phenomenal footballer. He was still doing phenomenal stuff. And one thing I would say, and it's really important for the youth development, grass coaches and any environment really, is we've got to adapt our training with this 1v1 stuff as they grow. That would be my first point, because I think when I do 1v1s with 6 to 11-year-olds, for example, it all looks very similar in terms of we want all the players to be exposed to the same stuff. And as they grow, though, as they start to come out of that, and I don't know, you get someone who's a little bit taller now, and he's got different physical needs, different technical needs. Again, I think you just adapt it and refine it as you go, without neglecting stuff. And eventually, when you get to the top end, Saul, players are going to be what they're going to be in terms of physically, especially. You can't deny what someone's going to be physically. And it's about, I think, when you get into the professional development phase and you see actually they're fully grown now in terms of a physical specimen, you've got to really develop players to their strengths now. You've got to refine it to the point where, okay, so let's take Peter Crouch and Jermaine Defoe, for example. Wonderful partnership. But in terms of 1v1 domination, they dominated the game in different ways, but they're both centre forwards or they're both strikers. So Peter Crouch scored 50 goals with his head because he dominated in the air and he used his physical attributes to dominate. And Jermaine Defoe is still scoring goals with his exceptional movement, exceptional technique. You know, he'd probably run across the front post and Peter Crouch would be on a back post. So as they grow, we've got to adapt our coaching. I think it starts off generic, and as they grow, it becomes a bit more specific to their needs.
Yeah, there's a lot to unwrap there, and some obviously great points as usual. Just, I mean, so going for the, I mean, yeah, we'll come back to position specifics. I think it's really important. There's a lot of stuff I do when I'm working, particularly with the, you know, the pro players and stuff. But I think generally there's also like the misconceptions about 1v1 as well. Do you know, and generally, like, you know, it's almost just thought of as if, or just generally, oh, you know, oh yeah, do a bit, or he's got a trick and that sort of thing. And that really frustrates me because, you know, for me, 1v1 skills are just skills like any other skills, like being able to ping the ball, cross the ball, volley, you know, pass, being able to do a 1v1 skill is exactly the same. And, you know, and lots of players do develop these, you know, of these, you know, naturally and evolve, you know, like your Sanchos, your playground players like that. But the reality is that players don't have those, you know, assets in their locker, then that's a problem at the highest level. Then as coaches, we've got to understand that. And then that's when we deliver. That's when we're going to be able to step in and say, all right, that's what we've got to do. And like you say, like, you know, different players have different assets. So, you know, your Peter Crouch, you know, is not going to be that one, that wide players driving down, doing loads of step overs and beating players, you know, getting beyond or with the ball. But it's understanding like what are your physical capabilities, you know, and what sort of 1v1 techniques are going to suit your game and the position of your game as well, isn't it, I suppose? So as when you're talking about that, the young players as well, I mean, yeah, absolutely. Foundation phase, it is just, you know, your global approach, if you like, breaking it down into the two 1v1 elements we talk about. You talk about Tottenham Ronaldo work, which is dribbling at players at front or from an angle, or Zidane work, which is receiving with behind or on the side, you know, those basic two areas, and just flooding those players with as much volume and experience for those opportunities as possible. But then, yeah, as you talk about now, when you get into the YDP and the PDP and when, you know, the top end, then it's about those little details, isn't it? And understanding how we can unbalance players to the unbalanced teams. And it might just be that, you know, movement before you receive the ball, that little fake, that little movement before the ball comes to just unbalance and then go. Or it might be, you know, I have to work a bit harder to unbalance the player, and I've got to do my little movements, little step overs, my cuts, my cross, or whatever. Do you know what I mean? I suppose it's dependent on, it's situational, isn't it? I suppose.
Definitely. And the main thing is there, like we talk about it quite a lot with our dynamic ball mastery. And I don't think this should stop. I was having a conversation with my colleague just yesterday, Saul, and he was saying about getting at the age groups under 13s, 14s, 15s, maybe some of the players are looking a bit stiffer because they might stop the dynamic ball mastery. And I think the one thing, again, going back to some of the stuff we spoke about previously, Saul, is I think the massive advantage that we keep going on about is not just the technical balance, but the physical balance, the returns of constantly doing your Cruyffs on both feet, your twisting, your turning, your hooking work, your chopping, your cutting left to right. That whatever the player ends up growing to be, you look at Virgil van Dijk's exceptional balance of going both sides 1v1. There isn't a weakness there, I don't think. Or you look at Jermaine Defoe's goal scoring to go both sides. He'll drop a shoulder, smash it on his left foot, or smash it on his right foot. You know, that physical balance is a thing that I think has to go all the way through your training sessions. You know, if you're going to practice 6 on your left, do 6 on your right. And, you know, that the returns of that shouldn't be undervalued massively.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I think that's another one of the big misconceptions, particularly in this country, is that, you know, first of all, they'll say, you know, well, what's the point in doing, you know, I was told by a skills coach who works actually at one of the top clubs. He says, oh, we don't do step overs and stuff like that. It's just like the circus. And I was like thinking, wow, Like, well, you think, Ronaldo, this is the circus, do you? You think, all these players, it's like just a conventional skill. Not everyone uses it, different on the pitch. I think Jamie Redknapp used step over, Ronaldo step over when when he was playing. So that's one of the misconceptions. Obviously, they're functional, they use it, and obviously, then we encourage the players to do lots of it, lots of those movement patterns, because then that's helping them develop the body for the modern game, the body for the modern 1v1 duel. You know what I mean? Like you say, the agility, the balance on both sides, explosivity on the left and right to get out and be dynamic with the ball. I work a lot of players come to me and say, look, I'm not quick. I say, well, look, not a lot you can do about that, but you just got to be as quick and sharp with the ball as possible. Do you know what I mean? You look at players, like down the years of Dan, maybe he's not the quickest, over that 10 yards, but with the ball, he is sharp and explosive and his movements are really quality. So I think that's one of the big misconceptions, isn't it, about doing that, flooding the players, like I said, the early ages with the high volume, quality repetition, that dynamic ball mastery, support them creating those movements. Players will choose their own skills. They'll choose their own weapons, their own artillery to use in the games. You can't force a player to use the skills, but it doesn't mean you don't show them all the skills, and you develop that, repertoire for them to make the decisions. And then, as you say, then when we get older, then really fine tuning, isn't it? It's about delivering that detail and being able to do it. And like you say, we see that a lot, didn't you? A lot of the foundation phase, they'll hammer lots of 1v1s, lots of 1v1 skills. They get into the YDP and they'll just stop, and they'll just become more formulated, more possession based, and more static, really. And then the players, like you say, will lose those quality movement patterns they've developed.
Yeah, and maybe that comes with us coaches wanting to do what we want to do rather than what the players continually need. And this whole nature be nurture, we'll go back to it again. So, and the key is, I know we've said nature plus nurture, but I think we've also got to nurture the player's nature. So what I mean is, so if you plant an apple tree in your back garden tomorrow, right? If you expect anything other than oranges in a year's time to fall off that tree, it's bizarre. But it's like planting an orange tree, knowing that that's what it's going to be. The kid ends up 6 foot tall, and you're expecting apples, or you're going surprised, why haven't we got apples? It's the same with players. I think players are going to be what they're going to be, right? But while we're building on that point, it doesn't mean we can't give them lots of this stuff. So like you said, 1,000 step overs in the first year of their football life is not going to harm them. Doesn't mean they're going to do 1,000 step overs, because they're going to refine and find out what they are anyway. So Neymar's got his signature move. Harry Kane doesn't often do a step over. He'll just shift it and put it in the top corner. Danielson used to do 12 step overs, but it worked. People will find out what their best moves are and stuff anyway, which is the same with passing. People have almost got signature passes that they love. You see Odegaard for Arsenal the other day, and he's playing really well off the outside of his foot. He loves that little prodded pass on the outside of his foot. And I think, so it's not a case of, they're going to be what they're going to be. And they will eventually, if you're asking them to do too much at 17, 18, that don't quite suit them. So if you're asking Peter Crouch to run away from a back four, like Jamie Vardy, he's soon going to rebel against you and say, listen, you're not getting the best out of me because I'm not Jamie Vardy, I'm Peter Crouch. So I think the key to that is always having an eye on the changes in development as they grow. And then obviously at 16 to 20, by the time they're 21, they'll be fully grown adults, but there's still a lot of growth and a lot of change in between their ages of 16 and 21.
Yeah. And I mean, looking at the bigger picture, then I suppose it is just about, just what your club's DNA is. What's the philosophy of the club? What sort of players do you want to produce? Now, we've been blessed to work at clubs where the demand is to produce Champions League players, so players for the very highest level. And obviously, we know that this is a real prerequisite, but obviously, there still is a conversation going on. Do you know what I mean? And I've worked at clubs necessarily where they haven't, this hasn't been a complete buy into this, in terms of real consistent use. And obviously, in clubs there has been, but obviously, I suppose that comes as well. Then if my experience of, for example, the courses for the FA courses. I mean, there hasn't really been any. Well, I haven't seen any 1v1. Do you know what I mean? Specific stuff on the FA courses. And also on one of the youth license, I was told there was no such thing as 1v1, and that's an old cliche. Like, there's an old quote I used a lot, but that's 10 or so years ago. It's one of the architects of the new youth modules told me that. Do you know what I mean? So I suppose it's just a case of the club you're working in, the environment you're in. If you're in an academy, what sort of players you want to produce, you've got to believe in, and also then it's just about I think as well, being brave enough to come away from the team enough, from the, what your team looks like on the weekend, to say, right, we can spend a bit more time in the individual stuff, because we realised the bigger picture about what it's going to look like down the road.
Yeah, and ultimately as well, when you look at like the Ajax model, so for example, yes, they want to create nice youth teams, but they're producing individuals to sell on and to sustain the club. And a lot of clubs have got to do that, whether it's Brighton with their fantastic model they've got at the moment, having to sell Ben White for £50 million or whatever. There was a when you look at the greatest teams down the years, they've always had the greatest players that have been the key. So, for example, Harry Kane at the moment, you take him out of the Spurs team, it significantly reduces it. Lewandowski last night, he's an exceptional individual who is still progressing, by the way, because people forget that it wasn't really until Pep Guardiola came along into his life as a footballer that he's actually just boomed and blossomed again at 30 onto another level. And he looks as fit as ever, as technically astute as ever. But I think, so one thing we've got to consider as well is, as players are growing, I know the four corner model. I don't really work from the four corner model, just because it works a bit easier in my mind, maybe because it's a bit more of a simple mind. But I go with the 4 Ps. The physical, it's obviously it's the same in terms of what it is, but it sticks in my mind: physical, practical, personal, and psychological. And we've got to help players develop their 1v1 individual abilities with that as well. So what I mean is, Roy Keane was an incredibly dominant 1v1 player, and he could dribble past the player. He could definitely drop a shoulder and go past someone. He would beat you in a tackle. He could win the ball in the air. So there was lots of 1v1 duels. But the other way he dominated the game, Saul, is with his personality and with his leadership and with his effort. So when you look at a James Milner and a Jordan Henderson, we've got to put that value of what they bring to the table in our practices as well. So if a lad is the most perseverant, hardworking player like a Jordan Henderson, which has got him to win the Champions League as a captain in the Premier League, by the way, qualities like that, the personality of a player needs to develop as well. Because if you're going to be Lionel Messi or Eric Cantona, you've got to have a big character. You've got to have a big personality, and you've got to encourage the arrogance or the swagger or the self-belief, because you can't be a number 10 and carry a team without a big personality. So that stuff has to be involved in our planning as well. How are we provoking more stuff out of their personality, or how are we creating leadership here? Because one day one of these boys might put a captain's armband on and lead a team in that way with their domination. I think that all comes out with dribbling and every single 1v1 situation we have on a pitch as well. So
yeah, that's a good point, because before we're trying to get into the actual session design, but it's more good points to chat about, because you look at like Harry Kane, for example. We talked the other night, someone who grew up as a 10 in the academy, moved to, migrated to number 9, and then basically can play as a 9 and a 10. But we talked about this before in the podcast, that, at that club, all the players had to have midfielder or creative midfielder qualities. You expect the expectation that they could all, pass it, move it, dominate 1v1, that sort of thing. So you create a culture where all your players have those midfielder or attacking midfielder qualities. So I think that's an interesting point. You want your players to be able to play everywhere. And just having that one, and you mentioned about the psychology, like that keen, that bravado, and that's a big thing. I always think I'm a big fan of like the actual 1v1 dual practices, and there's always an element of that, and each one of my practices, because I've been lucky to travel around the world and and present at conferences and stuff. And when I'm watching, like, for example, like possession practices and stuff like that, which are great, and I've used them all the time, but the problem is you lose those all the time. It's a get out for a player. If I'm looking for this, I'm passing. I don't need to make a decision. I'm just moving the ball. And then you put them on a bit of pressure. So hang on, it's a 1v1. You've got to solve the problem yourself. Do you know what I mean? You've got to actually step up here and have the personality to say, right, I'm going to do it, whether it's, just cut and bang face and play it forward, or whether I'm going to beat you with 1v1 skills as well. So I'm a big fan of that, because you stress the player, you challenge the player to make those decisions themselves, rather than say, yeah, I'm going to bounce it. And that's why I'm not a massive fan of like attacking overloaded practices, because I think it's just too easy for players to make the decision. I want to force the player to put them on the spot. They've got to solve that problem themselves and just put it on it. And then you want to create players have that natural bravado and confidence on the ball to do. I can do that. Do you know what I mean? Whether I'm playing as a right back or a left, centre back or right back, I can take the ball forward. I can beat a player. I'm used to that. I'm used to having the personality and the braveness to do it, because I've done it every day in training.
Definitely, and one of the terms that we would say a lot at our academy, so wouldn't it? It would be, especially with the 6 to 11s. And again, I don't think it should change a little bit, because you've got to learn the game. But the biggest reason we say stay on the ball, just that term, stay on the ball, 4 words, so powerful, is not just we want the technical outcomes and we want you to score a goal of the season, but it really is, again, this is about the character. It's building the courage on the ball, being brave enough, whether you end up, so if we're developing midfield attributes, like we say, okay, so you're playing in the middle of the pitch, we got all the qualities you need in there, and you're going to end up falling into a position that you find anyway, because no one really as a kid wants to be a centre back, and that's not disrespectful. It's probably becoming a bit more glamorous now with your Van Dijks, but Rio Ferdinand and John Terry, for example, played centre midfield as youth players with the midfield attributes, and they found their position there. Harry Kane, midfield, and he found his position as a striker because he's exceptional penalty box, and Ashley Cole was a forward and probably could play centre midfield, but he became the best left back, probably one of the best left backs in history. You know, they grew into their position, but just that courage on the ball and being brave enough to try things. It's interesting what you said, Saul, about, I think I watch Premier League football at the moment, and there is such a void. There's just a dearth of creativity and character. I see players passing the buck, not passing the ball. So Bruno Fernandes has created the most chances this season, but he's attempted the most passes. His courage and personality is just huge. Mo Salah has had the most shots on target, most shots in the Premier League. He scored the most goals. And again, I was talking to someone yesterday saying we've got really good strikers in the academy and at our club, and I'm sure everyone else has. And sometimes a player stops shooting, Saul, and all you've got to do is change the target. Hey, you've stopped shooting. Can you take more shots today? And because they've missed a few. Do you know what I mean? And again, you're just developing the character and the courage to do stuff, to try stuff, to not be scared, to have the audacity to foul. And do you know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. So then talking to then, let's move on then to the nitty gritty, session design. What are your thoughts then? You set up a session about 1v1, how you what's your thought process, how you get into a session, how often do you try to get it in your sessions?
Almost every time there'll be a 1v1 element somewhere. And again, right up to, I'm working with college boys at the moment, like 16 to 20-year-olds. And even there, it's really, really important to maintain 1v1 domination. And one of our lads, just a couple of days ago, 18 years old, quite small, 5'7", 5'8", absolutely terrific central midfielder, stepped onto a training pitch with a non-league step-3 team, which is really, really good for his development, playing with ex-professional footballers that have dropped down to that level. And he coped just fine, but he coped just fine, Saul, because he's been doing tons of 1v1 stuff. He's got quite, like we say, he's got quite a complete game in terms of physical, technical, all these attributes. So I'll always design a practice the starting point will be the basic 1v1 that you said, Saul. So I really like the basic, there's your line, or there's your 2 gates on your left and right shoulder. There's my 2. Let's just play a couple of passes and have a 1v1 showdown. Can I get past you? Can you get past me? Can I get the ball off you? That would always be the basic starting point. And then from there, there's loads of ways you can go with that, as we know. So if you just change the gates now to, okay, now it's me and you again, I'm facing you, Saul, the ultimate showdown, 3 yards apart, we pop a couple of passes, and the game pick and end. You just put a gate to your right and a gate to your left. Okay, so instead of the gates being behind you now, just by moving the gates to your left and right, we've got different outcomes. It's more lateral movements. I've got to maybe put some more left to right movements in. There's going to be a lot more contact defending and contact attacking. So you're going to get in close to me, probably be on my shoulder or on my hips or whatever, and I've got to twist and turn and keep it safe side. And again, from there, just by doing things like that, like moving the goals or moving the objective, the target of where you're scoring or where the end goal is, brings out different outcomes.
Yeah, interesting. So I absolutely agree, because for me, it starts right at the beginning. So I'm doing ball mastery warm up. All my ball mastery now is completely linked to the 1v1. It always has been, but really explicitly now, I'm thinking of right now, we're talking about those movements that's going to go right into the 1v1. So even if the players are a little warmed up, all my combination work, I literally just, the core skills that I think are the core skills of the game used with some other ones, variations, really specifically. And then all that, the combination work we do is the movement work is linked. I'm thinking, right, that's progressing. And that's my thought, is working with the players to support their movements going into the 1v1 duel. And if I'm talking about a perfect, for example, the stuff when I'm doing at Arsenal, the 18s, if I get a 20-minute slot or a 10-minute slot, I'm doing, 5 minutes, 7 minutes individual ball work, turns, 1v1 skills, specifically cuts, croys, step overs, marital combination work. Then I'm going into some passive pressure. I've got time there in 2s or 3s, some high volume, high repetition of, say side turning, cutting away some like, Ronaldo, De Jong or Zidane work, maybe some rolling into some Ronaldo or Mbappe work, I call it now, into that, and then into that live 1v1 when I'm then thinking, right, now we've built up into that, let's go into that. And it's a lot of my time thinking about, right, how I'm going to arrange that session. So I'm going for 1 ball each. And then especially when I'm working with some of the younger coaches at the clubs as well, and I'm doing the consultancy work, the foundation phase, I say, right, how are you constructing a session? You're doing 1 ball each, and then into, 1 ball between 2 to 3, get the high volume, and then into your 1v1 live. And then trying to think about that. And then just having that high quality, high volume movements, but quite specific, all to the 1v1 duel. And same with me. Like, I still like, the classic one where you're dribbling at a player. What I've done as well, sort of spoke with the older players, your classic, you're dribbling in. I work more of angles now. So I think that one, the Spurs, the rotation one, where some sets back, plays forward, you've got 3 players in the triangle. I always try now to work on angles. So you try going in and out, like you're right when you're going into the left or vice versa, stuff like that. But what I've done now, I think a lot more like stuff, training those repetition rotational practices, which are really useful, but trying to make it a little bit more game realistic. So what I do is, for example, if you can picture it, a 20 by 10 almost rectangle, players attacking from the top. He's got to receive the ball in a first touch. So he's receiving rather than dribbling like 5-6 yards, he's receiving to engage the defender. And if he gets over the line, it's 1 point. But if he gets inside the defender, maybe like a 5-yard gate, then that's 2 points or 3 points, if you know what I mean. So I try to defend like a fullback, so I've got to send him outside. So you're trying to create that natural sort of game thing. So it's maybe difficult for the listeners to picture that, but maybe I'll put like a demo up. But yeah, so I've really sort of progressed that, thinking how can I make them as the high volume, high repetition, so high rotation, and obviously ball rolling time really key. So, if I've got, 16 players, I'm confident of setting up, 4 groups of 1v1. Do you know what I mean? 4 groups at once, and there's just set one up, bang, roll in and step in when I can, like we talked about in the session design, basically. Yeah. Rather than that pet peeve of mine when, you see a coach who's got 12 players, they just got 2 players working and 10 players watching. I'm thinking, well, come on, man, just be a bit, let's be a bit braver. Let's be trust, 6 players in that group, 6 players in that group, be in the middle, set it up and watch this, set up, watch this. And I do that all over the world. Do you know what I mean? It works. Even the players in English aren't great. Just trying to get as much quality, like I said, it's in high volume repetition. That's what we need, those movements. Don't have to overthink it. Just get those players in those little 1v1 combat, scenarios. And really, probably still my favorite one, the classic one I've still got of Keith Boanas on my old level 2, 20 years ago, is that classic just 1v1 to a target. Do you know what I mean? Just receiving with my back pressure there. I've got to try and receive, turn and pass the ball. So you don't actually, it's not even about dribbling, it's just about receiving little movements to fake, to touch, buff and whip it around the corner. Do you know what I mean? And 1v1 to him, I've got 2 target and he's got 2 target the other ways, or 2v2, 2 target. I did the other day 2v2 to targets. So it's like a square, 4 players on the outside, 2 teams, 2v2, bang, and then progressed it into like a little 3rd man run sort of thing. So lots of areas to do. But yeah, I mean, for me, it's like us, like you said, really important to have an element of it in every session. If I don't have time and really push, for example, sometimes, the coach says, you've only got, 10 minutes, 5-10 minutes, or maybe I just do some ball mastering, or it's a day before a game and the coach doesn't want live 1v1s. I'll just do lots of, high volume pairs, 3rds and 3s, rotational passive pressure sort of thing. But I think it's really important to have that sort of idea, methodology, thinking, right, what does a good ball mastery 1v1 session look like, if you know what I mean?
Yeah, definitely, mate. And it's a good point. And again, just so if I just stick with the session I said, just because it's easy for listeners to see. So again, start with that one. I'm in a 12, let's say it's a 12 by 12 square. I'm in the middle of the square and there's 2 gates either side and it's me versus you. So you start with basic passing. And even on that, there's different ways to beat the player. So I'll play a pass to you and we say on the second pass, as you play it back to me, I might beat you on my first touch. I might just get a big first touch out my feet and I'm in the goal. Brilliant. Encourage it. Brilliant first touch, Johnny. You've beat your player with your first touch. The next time you're going to read that first touch. So now you go to block it because you think, wow, he's got a great first touch. We've got a Xavi or a Busquets here. You go that way. I fake my first touch and I cruyff the other way. Well, now I've beat you with my deception and a turn. All right, now that's not working. Now I might have a stun touch. You might encourage a stun touch. And when you say, put your foot on the ball. When he plays back to you, put your foot on the ball. What's that going to do? It's going to bring him towards you. And now the player starts to press the ball when you just drop his shoulder and do skills. So even within that little 1v1 duel, there's lots of different ways to beat a player. And again, if I was up against you, Saul, and you're really, really quick and you're an Ashley Cole and I'm quite slow, I might actually have to allow you to come closer to me, sit on my shoulder so I can protect it. I might have long legs like Peter Crouch, where I'm actually just securing the ball and retaining it like Harry Kane's good at securing the ball and holding it up, because that's all a part of the 1v1 domination, just literally holding on to the ball and retaining the ball. Do you know what I mean? And I might have to almost carry the ball with you hooked onto my side into that gate. It doesn't matter, as long as I get there. If I ain't got the explosive pace to get away or the great first touch, I might do it a different way. So, and another one I might change that, so is you might I call it a stitch up pass. So we just say, right now, boys, you can give the player opposite you any pass you like. Put it around their throat, their chest, give them a little bobbler, a little scooped one. So now you've got a different technical element to deal with. So instead of just basic passes on the floor, I'll scoop it up to your chest, Saul. So now you've got to either bring it down and move it on your first touch away from me, or you've got to instantly turn your back on me and go into protection mode. But again, the initial starting point, if you just change the start point, it completely changes the context of the 1v1.
Well, that's what I mean about those practices where, come on, you've got that player dribbling 5-10 yards. For me, there's much more interesting now. You just, it's a little combination, and then it comes into his feet, and your first touch is right. I've got to control it, and the defender's coming out. And I always talk about engaging the defender. Like my first touch going straight at the heart, rather than taking it down the line. So we always talk about boom, straight at the heart. And can I engage? Have I got the quality to suck the defender in? Maybe, and even then I could just beat him with one movement, or like you say, maybe he's too tight, and I just go first time around him. I think that's really important. Just being a bit sort of creative with the way you because just see, because you mentioned the Chris Ramsey's phone box game, because Alex Inglethorpe used to do the variation where someone would ping the ball in from like 15-20 yards. You've got to receive it, and then straight away. And that's do you know what I mean? That's the level, isn't it? Really, because that's what we talk about. Because you want, that's something that is that first. You want the first touch. That's what about in a game. I've got to have the quality, the first touch under pressure to then engage to 1v1, or even like before the ball comes, a little movement to them even go first time, like you talked about. I mean, that's the game, isn't it? So like obviously the younger age groups, you can do that. Yeah, let them dribble, and then that sort of conventional one. But then just being a bit more creative in the way how you starting it. Little for example, one player on the top, one player on the bottom, two players in the middle. Combination, bang, bang, bang. He takes him on for season, and those rotate round, and then the other two have a go. Same thing. So you get lots of repetition, rotational practice, but it's a bit more interesting. And like you say, with the first, you've got it's a first touch practice, isn't it? Really, do you know what I mean? And with the 1v1 thing as well.
Yeah, that little practice you said, Salt, the phone box one. I love still doing that, but again, I've made a little adaptations, and that bit that you said Alex done, I'll do it as well. And the two things that you get from that is, so imagine, if we go 3 and 3, right? There's 3 pinks in a little box. Let's say it's a little 3x3 yard box, and for the listeners, them players are basically guarding the outside of the box, shall we say, and they've got to move around. The player that's passing into that box, they've already got a real bit of pressure on their technical element. They've got a player pass into a really tight space. So there's already pressure on the pass being precise into feet. The player receiving has got a real technical test of, if you can move the touch, so if you can spot the little space, the free line, so the player's protecting behind you to your left and your right, well, the first touch forward, take your first touch forward out. Great. If not, you've really got to work on that stun touch. Keep it tight to your feet. Then you start rocking and rolling and getting out. The way you can also bring that player that passed it into, sort of, I like to do, that little out pass we spoke about the other week, like Bergkamp, you're rocking and rolling and rocking and rolling. You can't quite dribble your way out. So now that guy that passed it into you, can you poke a little pass through someone's legs like Harry Kane loves to do, or can you flip one over their legs, that little scoop pass? And the rule is, if you get the pass out, you get to a free run out to scoring another little goal that's maybe there. You put like little side goals on. Do you know what I mean? Can you picture it? So I'm in a tight area. I can't dribble my way out. I can't get my first touch out. So what else can I rely on? I'll get a little out pass. So punch a little pass out, get a 1-2, and I'll go and score. And then you just rotate. So the guy that passed into you, he goes in the middle. The next guy that was actively resting, he comes and punches the pass in. You go retrieve your ball and join the line. And the thing is, the practice is really dynamic as well, Saul. No one's ever standing around, because the defenders are working really hard, as we know, to work on their defensive movements and their lateral movements, moving their feet. And one thing I'd say about 1v1 practice, sort of gets neglected, in my opinion, as well, we don't coach defenders enough. We don't coach the defending element. I've done sessions now where, down the years, where I really wanted to work on the dribbling, Saul. But the defending was so atrocious. They was defending like Dick Van Dyke, not Virgil van Dijk. And, do you know what I mean? And it was almost comical at times. So we had to spend a couple of weeks saying, hey, let's go back to basics. Because the idea of that is, if the player's dribbling every time and getting success, is it good dribbling, or is it really poor defending? So we had to get the defending to be a bit more resistant first. I wanted a few tackles. I wanted contact. I wanted them correct body shape, not diving in. and then we could really get to work on the attacking. So I think we've always got to focus. Don't do things in isolation. For me, if you're always working on attacking, you must be working on a defensive element. You must be encouraging really good 1v1 defending as well.
Yeah, it's a great point, because that's what I said earlier about that, that one about, you dribble over the line, it's 1 point, but if you dribble inside the defender, maybe 5, with a little gate, it's 2 or 3. So that, because that's when I was watching a lot of those practices, you get 1v1 practice, and they'll just be standing straight on like this. I'm thinking, well, 1, you're defending poorly. 2, in a game, you're never going to be defending like that. So maybe then you have the constraints in your 1v1. I'm thinking, right, come on, don't let him, whatever. If he's gonna score, he scores there. Doesn't score to 2. Do you know what I mean? It's the same in the game. Not going to let him inside. I'm sending him down the line. He's not coming inside, right? So having like that creativity in your session design, the constraints, to say, right, okay, then I'm doing that with the, with the 18s and stuff. That same, I've had to step in and say, well, hang on a minute, boys, this is, defender's poor here. Don't let him in there. If he comes in, there's 2 points. Then you make it competitive, counting points, stuff like that. And you say, whatever you do, doesn't come in there. And the same as the game, right? No way, he's not coming into goal, is he? You're going to send him outside, delay, whatever, bang, bang, right? So that, but I think it's a good point. And I'll admit, like, in my early career, especially in those, as idealistic days under Chris, I didn't work on 1v1 defending at all much, and in the 1v1. But then I came to realize, actually, the more, not working on 1v1 a lot, but working on 1v1 enough, that it actually will improve your 1v1 attackers, because suddenly, your defenders know how to defend properly, or a little bit better. Do you know what I mean? Because I was a bit of a pure, I was too much of a pure. I was thinking, attacking. I didn't do any team possession. It's all individual possession. Don't work on defending once. We did work defending. We talked about balance. We did balance games, head up balance games for awareness, but also balance all. But I think actually, reminding players is really important. I say working players, because what that's going to do is going to make your attackers better, innit?
Yeah, definitely. And I always try and use. So I've got the 4 Ps for a player. The physical stuff. But when you talk about individual ball stuff, so I know I've spoke to you a lot about this. Is I look at, first of all, the word is responsibilities for a reason, because I see even senior professional footballers pass the buck. It's about assuming responsibility. So we've all got, if I'm a player and you're a player, no matter what we're going to be, we've got 4 responsibilities. Can you receive the ball well? Whatever that looks like, whether it's in the air, on the floor, first foot, second foot, in your own half, in their box. Can you retain the ball well? And again, there's different parts to that. Dribbling is a part of retaining the ball. If you're dropping a shoulder, securing the ball and shielding the ball, like Harry Kane, is all a part of retaining the ball. Running with a ball like Mbappe. If you're just a runner, or like I watched Bentancur the other night for Spurs, he carried the ball 30 yards up the pitch, won a foul, and it's exceptional retention of the ball. But he ain't dropped a shoulder. He didn't do a step over. He just travelled with the ball. And the last one, which is underrated, which you see, if you watch Manchester City players or Pep Guardiola players, they do what's called conducting the ball. They'll just put their foot on the ball and they'll wait for the game to move. And they're not dribbled. They've not run with it. They're not hustling and busting. They've just put their foot on the ball. They've took 3 or 4 touches or 3 or 4 seconds on the ball, and they're watching the game move. And all of a sudden, the centre forward jumps. Now they play. So they've not dribbled past anyone, but they're still retaining the ball. And the last thing is, and again, this is the defending sort, is the retrieving of the ball. Luis Suarez, Danny Welbeck. Danny Welbeck's an exceptional retriever of the ball. He used to press, didn't he, and really hound players and win the ball. But Virgil van Dijk is as well. So that regaining of the ball is a part that's I always try and put them 4 R's in our practice. And the regaining of the ball is the one. So I don't say to the young defenders, especially, because they have to buy into defending, don't they? It's not as trendy. So I say, okay, is it defending or is it getting the ball back? So actually, we're enhancing your attacking. So if you're good at getting this ball back, you're going to go and score in the goal. Do you want to score goals? And all of a sudden they go, yeah, go and get the ball back then. And all of a sudden their attitude changes to it straight away. Do you know what I mean? Because you want your whole team to be good at retrieving the ball. Like Bernardo Silva, for example, is another one that is exceptional at retrieving the ball. So I always put that into my planning. So make sure that I'm trying to hit the 4 R's, the receiving, retaining, and releasing and retrieving of the ball at some point in the practice. Got to expose them to it.
Yeah, and you talked about Guardiola. There's a great point in it. There's that quote in one of the books where he talks about. He says, first thing I look for in a player is, can they dribble? Do you know what I mean? And you look at those players he's got, and all those different sorts of 1v1 players. Your Bernardo Silvas, your KDBs inside the pitch, can play inside. Foden, who can go beyond as well, come side and cut. Sterling's and your Mahrez's and Cancelo's. It's like, and Carl Walker on the other side. So many, Edison. Great 1v1 player under pressure. Do you know what I mean? Can play the ball. You know what I mean? Black. So lots of different, so, and that's why, like, you know, when I see, like, you know, coaches on you know, Twitter saying, oh yeah, you know, under sevens, under eights, we just do rondos all the time, rondos play, which is fair enough. But then you're saying, like, you know, that's why I say, like, remember the, you know, the end point's different to the beginning point. Do you know what I mean? You know, and you want to try and give players as much time to explore the ball, express it, get on it, take responsibility, develop those movements. You're not going to be able to develop those lateral quality movements, you know, if I'm just passing the ball all the time, you know, treating like a hot potato. So I'm not saying, you know, you got to do it all the time. I'm saying, you know, if you, that's an issue. Some of the philosophies which are just purely, right, move it, like that sort of thing. So yeah, I think it's a great example to see, like, you know, that the adult game is different to the youth game. So I mean, remember that and let players, you know, like Chris used to talk about, you know, you want that messy games, those messy sessions, those messy matches. That's, you know, reality. That's where you get the best outcomes.
Yeah, definitely, mate. And again, I know I keep saying, I've probably said about 6 times, but players will end up being what they're going to be, especially from a physical point of view. And personality characteristics come into a lot of this as well, Saul, don't they? So I've had some players down the years as well, though, Saul, and I'm sure you have, and everyone has, where actually their natural instincts was to defend. They've just got this something about their personality where I want to go near my goal. So if you just chuck a ball and say, play, boys, your players will go where they want to go anyway. Do you know what I mean? The midfielders will go in the middle of the pitch. The ones that can't cope in there will go on the edges somewhere. The one that's a bit greedy and likes goals will go at the top end of the pitch. The one that actually has instincts towards defending, or not necessarily instincts towards defending, but maybe that little bit more selfless and sacrificial and, you know, Mr. Team player, they'll probably drop to the back end of the pitch, or like a Busquets and a Kante, you know, them humble, really team orientated players. And what was the thing that Del Bosque said? He said, if you watch the game, you don't really see Busquets, such as his humility. But if you watch Busquets, you see the whole game. And he's probably found his position because of his personality and stuff. And sometimes we've got to set a practice for them players as well, so haven't we, as you know? So if I've got 4 players in my group that just love defending, and let's say, for example, they've got beat with a ball over the top a lot, Saul. So he played it over the top of me. I've got caught out with my positioning. I was either square-footed or a bit too high against the runner. Just change the practice slightly. So you've got to just start at the goal and give the defender. So we're 1v1 now, Saul. I'm in front of you. You're behind me. You throw the ball over my head, and just that's the starting point. So you've thrown it over my head now. I'm first to the ball, working on my defending with my back to the player and facing my own goal. And I've got a Jamie Vardy chasing me on my back. So yes, it's an attacking practice in terms of he's going to get to the ball first, but he's actually working on the defensive element of playing the ball over the top, getting there to retrieve the ball, and then having the composure to rock and roll or find a forward pass back to the goal. Let's say it's a shot, but you can say it's a target or pass. Do you know what I mean? So we're actually designing the session to bring the best out in those players that have outstanding defensive qualities, attributes, and instincts as well at a young age.
Yeah. I mean, that's absolutely. I mean, talk about when you work on the older players, the YDP, your PDP, your pro players. I mean, that is it. You'd be working on 1v1 profile. I'm preparing for the game against Liverpool on the weekend. You know, I identify Salah's 1v1 profile. Yeah, he likes to run beyond, is really good, or he can get a defeat and then cut inside, likes to come inside, or he likes also can use his right. So you're trying to construct sessions, 1v1 sessions, where you're trying to say, okay, what are his 1v1 qualities? What's his 1v1 profile? And then thinking about, right, how can you stop that? Do you know what I mean? So look at Andy Robertson, for example, very different, more of a straight line runner, and then, you know, good distribution, very different to like a Trent Alexander-Arnold's distribute, where he's just, you know, you've got to try and figure out, you know, what are the dangers. So I think that's really key as well, isn't it? Thinking about what it looks like, you know, obviously with the younger ones, but at the top end, you know, when you work with your 18s, your 90s, your pro players, you know, how you can do that. So for example, when I'm working with those, you know, those pro players, it's always about, for example, the stuff we did with Noni Madueke like in the beginning of the season, that was very much, okay, this is sort of the position of pitch he plays in. Let's try and think about, you know, where he can be successful, work on those 1v1 tactics for that position. That wide forward play, he plays a lot as the 11 or 7, would work on both sides always, but really isolate those movements and those quality 1v1 tactics, which is going to be supported to be successful, and then just hammer them. Do you know what I mean? Obviously, and everything's got an end product on the end as well. So obviously, a shot across most of your shot and working on those movements. Same with like the stuff with Max Aarons as like a fullback who really is like a deep line winger. Lots of 1v1 play. Like I said, talking about, you know, the first touch to engage the player. Do you know what I mean? To take him inside to then go out, potentially, or come inside if he lets you, that sort of thing. So just understanding the 1v1 tactics in the game, and then being able to then, you know, work at the highest level. That's what the position specific stuff looks like. It looks a lot different for those guys than if you're doing a nice 10s and 11 sessions. You know what I mean? Before we go on comment that, mate, just quickly, because we're running out of time. if you're a grassroots session, you're a grassroots coach, you got an hour, you got the boys or the girls for an hour each week on the AstroTurf. It's really windy, all that sort of rubbish, whatever.
Yeah.
You know, by the airport, it's really cold weather. But how do you, you got 1 hour a week with the kids. What you do? How are you getting 1v1 into your session? How long are you doing it for? That sort of thing.
Well, the first thing I would do is, especially if it's a cold night, you know, we said about arrival activities. If we wanted to go a bit more heavy on 1v1 stuff, one of the best things, so I call it the ladder game or Champions League, Sunday League. So what I mean is, if you can picture, if you've got 16 players in your group, set up 8 little mini pitches, just side by side in a ladder. So it creates like a ladder, right? And it's a brilliant activity. You've got to keep your eye on it as you're setting up. So you arrive, it's 5 to 6, you're on 6 till 7. Get the squares set up. You've got your 8 pitches. The first 2 that arrive, they go on the Champions League pitch. And just say to them, here's the game, guys. I've got to get across your line. You've got to get across my line. It's a little 5-yard box. Player 1-2, go into the 1v1 duel. Next 2 come. You're on the second pitch, guys. You're on the Europa League pitch. Right, boys, it's winners up, losers down. After 30 seconds, I'm going to say change. Play your partner. If I get across Saul's line 4 times, he gets across my line 3 times, I win. Winners go up, losers go down. And please don't be scared to have competition. Children love competition, right? Winners go up, losers go down. The next 2 arrive. So as soon as they arrive, they're into an activity. Put them on the third pitch. Okay, this is call it what you like. Just name the pitches, just for a little bit of fun. The bottom one ends up, whatever you want. Sometimes they name it stadiums. Sometimes you get a bit of rivalry. A Spurs fan might go, well, let's call it the Emirates. Or a Man United fan might go, well, let's call it the Etihad. Do you know what I mean? So
I'll call it White Lane, thank you very much.
No, but you know what I mean? So all of a sudden, the kids are interacting socially. And before you know it, Saul, you've got 16 boys, 2 on each pitch. There's some fireworks going on. There's a competition. Yes, players might be losing. So you've got to watch out for that. If I was on the Champions League pitch and I've ended on the bottom pitch, again, there's a good element there. The lad's going to have to deal with himself emotionally. You know, yes, you've lost a few games. Okay, why have you lost? You're defending, you've got to improve. He might go, yeah, I'm diving in. Okay, don't dive in. Think about the stuff we spoke about. But you don't even have to coach it. Just set that up as an arrival activity, 5 minutes, 5 to 10 minutes. If it's going well, let it go for 10 minutes. And just once you've got your little other bits set up and just literally walk from pitch to pitch. And like we said the other week, so just keep spinning plates, catch them being good at stuff. If little Johnny's a bit upset because he's gone down 3 pitches, can you find a way to pick him back up? All of a sudden, every time I've done that, Saul, the session is on fire because they've started with energy, enthusiasm.
Competitive cauldron.
Yeah, the competitive cauldron. You've stoked it up a bit, the atmosphere, and your session is ready to go. And then I would go into your specific activities, whether it was 1v1 in front of the goal or whatever it is we was working on. Do you know what I mean? The little box games, like we said. But I'd try to get quite a lot in with the young kids. Like I say, 6 to 11-year-olds, guaranteed there would be quite a lot of 1v1 in my session.
Same. If I was thinking that, I'd say same. Like, you know, your rival, get them in there. You know, for example, 16 players, you've got 4 boxes, 4 players in each box. Your little rotation practice, pass, 1v1, or even just simply face up, little payoff, just boom, bang, and then next 2 go bang, next 2 go bang, next 2 go, and like high repetition. Even if it's 5, I say to coaches, like even if it's 5 or 10 minutes, even if you do 5 minutes to 10 minutes of quality work, it's better than nothing, but it's just the outcome you're going to get are going to be fantastic. I'm going to move just last quickly. You had a question from on our previous podcast from Michael Petrus here. He says, we were talking about the session design. He said, great topic and discussion. I'm interested to know your opinion about practice 2v2s or 3v3s in fundamental phase, let's say under 8s, under 9s in the academy, under 9s. In the academy where I'm working, we have to do drill only up-numbered 2v1s, 3v2s, etc. So that's like what I was talking about earlier about those. I think we were talking about, you know, there's simple, like, 2v1 to a goal, 3v2 to a goal, bang, 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 which is fair enough because I suppose we're working on the decision making and the overload, whatever. But my issue with that is that just put them in a 2v2 and 3v3, we got numbers up, it's harder, right? And you threw a goal like a little small side game when, like I said earlier, the players have got to make a decision rather than, okay, here, there's always a spare pass on. You're practicing the easiest thing in the world. Do you know what I mean? You're practicing an easy thing. Isolate 2v1, dribble them there, play there. You could do that one session, then you have to go back to it. Play a 2v2 or 3v3. Do you know what I mean? We've actually got numbers up, and I've got to work harder to actually work it here. Actually, I've got to stay on it. Maybe rock and roll, okay, around the corner, that sort of thing. Do you know what I mean? So that's why I've always been like, I've always gone away from those. Not saying it's not great, quality outcomes to have from that, but that's my thing. You're saying you only do that. It's just thinking, well, when are they? That's making it a little bit easier for the players. What's your thoughts? Just briefly, got 2 couple of minutes, mate. Go on.
Yeah. So like the 2v2 and a 3v3, or let's say it's a 4v4 game. you'll always get a 1v1 in there anyway. And then you'll always get an overload because I might have run beyond you and I'm out the game. And a 3v2 will occur anyway, or a 2v1 will occur anyway. And naturally, no matter what numbers game you play, the situations are always going to arise. And then it's just about, encouraging it and spotting it and noticing it and having the skill to decision making. But again, people talk about decision making with young children the same way they do with professional footballers. And I think it's incorrect. Yes, it's the really efficient thing to do on a 2v1. If you hook the defender in and your mate is spare and he is open, the most efficient and intelligent and obvious thing to do is pass to your mate, let him go and score. Well, actually, even on a professional football pitch, that's not always the best thing to do. Because everyone remembers the picture of Son and Sissoko versus Van Dijk. And the genius of Van Dijk on a 2v1, he's such a genius. He stepped on Son and said, pass it to Sissoko, please. And it's the obvious part, is it? He passed it to Sissoko. Sissoko's now on his left foot, shooting from 18 yards out. And it's no disrespect to Sissoko. He's an excellent footballer, better than I've ever been. But is he as good a finisher of Son? No. Who would you prefer shooting in that situation? Son. So it's not always the best thing, even at that level. And with kids, if my objective with an 8-year-old is I want to develop your courage on the ball, I'm telling him to refuse that. I'm going to say to the kid, use that player there as your decoy. Throw a little step over in, like you said, Saul, unbalance the player that way and go past him, please. And he does it, smashes it in the top corner, or he has a shot and his mate gets the rebound anyway. Or do you know what I mean? So with kids, I still would lean towards encourage the bravery.
Yeah. I know exactly. And you made the point there, same, you're doing a 3v3. It's about teaching players to identify where the overloads are in that. I break pressure, I roll out, boom. Now it's a 3v2, bang, I've got him recovering as well. But where's the overload now? Where's the 2v1? Do you know what I mean? So I dribble towards that play, like you say, isolate, drive at the heart, bang, then maybe like pop it with the outside of your foot or step over, come inside, use him as a decoy. Do you know what I mean? But it's much more interesting and dynamic to do that in a 3v3 rather than a 3v2 where it's, set up for, we're running out a player here, boom, let's do it. Not saying it's not sort of got the outcomes there, because you can talk about through ball, stuff like that, but like you say, that outcome going to have also got the recovering player here and that sort of thing as well. Do you know what I mean?
Definitely, mate. And I think, like you say, having a guaranteed 3v2 in there, and again, I'm not against these practices. I do it sometimes myself as well, because you might have a 2v2. And the reason I put a magic man in the middle of the pitch is because little Johnny's not getting enough of the ball and he's not got the confidence to go and get the ball back yet. So part of your design might be it's a 2v2 on a pitch. And Johnny, you're going to just wear a white bib and you're what we call a magic man or a floater. Call him what you like, link player, call him what you like, doesn't matter. But people will go, why are you giving up? But it's not giving them an overload, or it's not having a link player. It's, I've got an outcome for this kid. He needs to get on the ball more. So if he ends up being the one who's the spare man, and when the 2v2 play to him in a bit more space, well, my objectives are complete. He's got a little bit more time and space on the ball. He's not losing it as much because he's not thrust into the heart. He builds his confidence. We now take the white bib off of him. We tell him to join the line and go and join a 2v2 practice. We might have helped him with his confidence. Do you know what I mean? So again, depending on what your objective is for the individuals, I keep bringing it back to individuals, but depending what your objective are with that group of players, as long as you've got clarity on it and as long as you're developing them, the 1v1 stuff will come out anyway. And just be careful that we pounce on stuff like if a kid is absolutely refusing 1v1 or they're refusing to do the brave stuff, again, encourage it. We're developing the courage in the players. You're developing a positive attitude, an attack-minded mindset in the players. Do you know what I mean?
That's it. Glenn, thanks very much, mate. Again, it's been fantastic.
Cheers, mate. Loved it.
And listen, if you got a question, don't be afraid. You can put the question on. That was a comment on our YouTube channel. Also got a YouTube channel if you want to watch the videos of us too. I don't know why you would do. Just listen to it, to our ugly faces, or you can always email me at saul@mypersonalfootballcoach.com, or you can just direct Twitter just on Twitter or the coaching family page. But thanks very much. Like I said, look, we're just two coaches. Those opinions. We're not saying anything. This is not gospel. We're just giving our opinion. But listen, thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time.
Take care.
Welcome to the Coaching Family Soccer Coaching Podcast, a podcast for soccer coaches from grassroots to the pro game. Soccer coaches who love the game, love coaching, and want to get better. Join our community on Twitter @CoachingFamily.